You to Thanksgiving, Stella. Your brother Julian is bringing his new wealthy girlfriend to meet the family, and your blue-collar construction job would just embarrass him. They expected me to cry, beg, or scream. Instead, I looked at my reflection, seeing a proud woman standing tall in her hard hat, and I smiled quietly. I understand, I said. They thought they had successfully locked me out of the family legacy to protect Julian's fragile ego. But 5 days after Thanksgiving, my parents and my brother showed up at my construction site door, furious, trembling, and completely broken after finding out the terrifying truth. Julian's girlfriend wasn't just wealthy, she was my client. Follow my story until the end to see the ultimate reversal. My name is Stella, and at 30 years old, I've spent the better part of a decade learning that some people value a crisp suit far more than honest, hard work. My family was the perfect example of this. To my parents, my younger brother Julian was the golden child, a boy genius who wore tailored blazers and ran a perpetually failing digital consulting firm that my parents secretly bankrolled. I, on the other hand, was the family disappointment. I worked in commercial construction, a world of heavy machinery, mud, and steel. The breaking point came just a week before Thanksgiving. I was sitting in my truck at an active job site when my mother called. She didn't ask how I was doing. She just cleared her throat and delivered the blow with a chilling lack of empathy. "We can't invite you to Thanksgiving this year, Stella," she said, her voice dripping with artificial regret. "Julian is bringing his new, incredibly wealthy girlfriend to meet the family for the first time. He's trying to secure her as a major investor, and honestly, your blue-collar construction job would just embarrass him in front of her." They expected me to scream, cry, or beg for a seat at the table. Instead, I just looked at my reflection in the side mirror, a proud, capable woman in a high-visibility vest and a hard hat. I smiled quietly. "I understand, Mom," I replied and hung up. They truly believed they had locked me out. What they didn't know was that they had just walked into a trap of their own making. They thought my job consisted of nothing more than swinging a hammer and shoveling dirt in the freezing cold. To Julian and my parents, blue-collar was synonymous with uneducated and broke. But their arrogance had blinded them to the reality of what I had actually built over the last 5 years. I didn't just work on construction sites. I owned the company. After years of grinding, saving every penny, and mastering the logistics of commercial infrastructure, I was the CEO of a rapidly growing contracting firm with 40 full-time employees and millions of dollars in heavy equipment. While my parents were busy draining their own retirement savings to prop up Julian's bleeding, debt-ridden consulting business, my company was quietly thriving. I didn't need a fancy office or a tailored suit to prove my worth. My success was written in the concrete foundations and steel beams of the city's rising skyline. I wore my mud-stained vest like a badge of honor because I knew exactly what it took to earn it. Before we get to the holiday dinner and the massive storm that was about to hit you are watching this video from, let's see how far our hardworking community reaches. While they were busy scrubbing me from the guest list to protect Julian's fragile, manufactured ego, I was preparing for a massive business meeting that would change the trajectory of all our lives forever. Thanksgiving Day arrived, bringing with it a crisp, biting autumn wind. While the rest of the city was rushing home to family gatherings, carving turkeys, and raising glasses, I spent my morning in the absolute quiet of my home office. There was no lonely pining, no tears shed over the empty seat at my parents' dining table, and certainly no resentment. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. My family was wrapped up in their elaborate theater of false prestige, desperate to paint Julian as a high-flying corporate magnate for his new girlfriend. Meanwhile, I was focused on actual, undeniable reality. Spread out across my desk were massive rolls of blueprints, structural schematics, and legal contracts for the single largest project my company had ever bid on. It was a multi-million-dollar luxury commercial development right in the heart of the city's financial district. The entire project was being financed by an elite, notoriously sharp venture capitalist mogul named Vanessa Vance. Vanessa was legendary in the real estate world. She didn't tolerate excuses, she despised pretension, and she only partnered with the absolute best in the industry. I spent hours carefully reviewing every line item, calculating load-bearing metrics, and finalizing the timeline. Winning this contract wouldn't just elevate my business, it would cement my company as a premier force in the state. As I signed my name at the bottom of the proposal, I smiled, completely unaware that Vanessa Vance was about to bridge the gap between my quiet success and my family's manufactured illusion. Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house was a masterclass in deception, a fact I learned a few days later when my favorite aunt secretly leaked the details to me via text. As the family gathered around the pristine dining table, Julian spent the entire evening aggressively bragging about his non-existent corporate triumphs. He painted himself as a brilliant financial architect, desperately trying to look sophisticated in front of Vanessa Vance. My parents smiled and nodded like proud royal courtiers, completely enabling his delusional fantasy while pouring expensive wine they could barely afford. But the carefully constructed facade began to crack during the main course. Vanessa, possessing the sharp instincts of a true executive, politely turned the conversation toward the rest of the family. "Julian tells me he has an older sister," she noted, looking at my mother. "What does Stella do for a living?" The question caught my parents completely off guard. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the room. My mother nervously cleared her throat, her face flushing a deep crimson as she desperately tried to find a way to hide my blue-collar reality. "Oh, Stella is unwell," my father lied smoothly, recovering just enough to offer a tight, manufactured smile. "She couldn't make it tonight because she's away on an extended business trip out of state." Julian quickly chimed in, changing the subject back to himself to steer Vanessa away from the truth. They truly believed they had successfully buried my existence to protect Julian's fragile ego, completely unaware that their desperate lie had just set a devastating trap for Monday morning. Monday morning arrived with the relentless roar of diesel engines and the sharp, crisp smell of autumn air. Vanessa Vance had scheduled an emergency on-site meeting at my massive development project to personally inspect the excavation progress before releasing the initial multi-million-dollar funding tranche. She had mentioned she would be bringing a guest along, but I was far too busy reviewing safety protocols to give it a second thought. I stood near the edge of the roaring, high-stakes construction zone, completely in my element. Suddenly, a sleek luxury vehicle pulled up to the security gate. The doors opened, and out stepped Vanessa, looking every bit the high-powered venture capitalist she was. But as my eyes drifted to the two passengers following closely behind her, my heart skipped a beat, replaced instantly by a wave of pure, icy clarity. It was Julian, dressed in a pristine, tailored blazer, flanked by my parents, who had eagerly driven him there after he bragged that his wealthy client was taking him to inspect a premier corporate property. They expected to see a playground for elite white-collar executives. They certainly did not expect to see me. They walked onto the muddy terrain, their expensive shoes instantly ruined by the wet earth. My parents looked around with deep disdain, completely blind to the scale of the enterprise before them. Julian was busy whispering something into Vanessa's ear, adjusting his collar with his usual unearned arrogance. But as they approached the central command trailer, Vanessa suddenly stopped and smiled warmly, looking right past them. I stepped forward, holding a roll of blueprints, wearing my commanding orange safety vest and yellow hard hat. The collective look of absolute horror that washed over my family's faces was nothing short of magnificent. The jaw-dropping climax unfolded in a matter of seconds. Vanessa proudly stepped forward, gestured directly toward me, and looked at Julian with an enthusiastic smile. "Julian, I want you to meet Stella, the brilliant CEO and mastermind saving my entire commercial real estate portfolio," she announced. The absolute color drained from Julian's face instantly. My mother let out a sharp, audible gasp, while my father froze completely, his mouth hanging open in sheer disbelief. The parents who had cast me out just days ago for being an embarrassing blue-collar worker suddenly realized that their daughter was actually the boss of the powerful woman they were desperately trying to impress. Julian desperately tried to save himself, stammering and stumbling over his words as he tried to pretend we didn't know each other. But Vanessa was far too sharp. She looked at his panicked expression, then looked at my parents and finally back at me. "Wait a minute," Vanessa said, her voice dropping into a cold, Dangerous register. Stella, isn't this the brother you told me about? The one who disinvited you to Thanksgiving because your honest work wasn't good enough for his elite circle? The heavy truth exploded right there in the mud. I didn't say a word. I just gave a slow, deliberate nod. Vanessa's expression turned to one of absolute disgust as she looked at Julian and my parents. The immediate financial consequences hit Julian like a physical blow. Vanessa turned to him coldly and said, "Our contract is canceled, Julian. I don't do business with frauds who look down on the very people who build this city." Julian sank to his knees, his entire future evaporating in front of the daughter they thought would embarrass them. 5 days after that devastating Monday morning showdown, the final scene of retribution took place. I was sitting inside my on-site trailer, quietly sipping coffee, when a frantic knock rattled the door. I opened it to find my parents and Julian standing on the metal steps. They were furious, trembling, and completely broken. Vanessa had not only canceled Julian's contract, she had blacklisted his firm across her entire venture capitalist network. Faced with immediate bankruptcy, my family had swallowed their pride to come begging. "Stella, please," my mother whimpered, her tears mixing with the falling rain. "You have to speak to Vanessa. Tell her it was all a big misunderstanding. If you don't help your brother, he'll lose everything." I looked at the three of them, remembering the cold lack of empathy in my mother's voice when she told me I would embarrass them. I felt no anger, only a profound sense of clarity. "You locked me out of the family table to protect an illusion," I said calmly, leaning against the doorframe. "Now you have to live with the reality you built." "My answer is no." I closed the door, shutting out their frantic pleas forever. 3 months later, my project successfully launched, cementing my place as a premier force in the industry. For the first time, I was accountable to no one but myself. What would you do if you were in my place?